From MTN Sports, welcome to Grizzly Insider, sponsored by Albertsons Safeway.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of the Grizz Insider here on the Montana Television Network. Alongside the voice of the Grizz, Riley Corcoran, I'm Kyle Hansen, and we're your hosts as the regular season for the Montana Grizzlies has come to a close. And for Montana, Riley, they're 8-4 coming off a 34-11 loss in the 123rd Brawl of the Wild. Tough pill to swallow, but there is still football ahead for Montana.
Yeah, good way to put it. And there's nothing to maybe make you feel better about losing a game like that, especially when you pour so much into it all season long. And quite frankly, it's really hard to just tip your hat and say, hey, Cats are a pretty darn good team. Yeah. And they are the #1 seed for a reason, undefeated, and they had all the mojo going their way. And I think that there was a path for Montana to come away with the win over in Bozeman, and they held the rope for a little bit, but eventually you have to help out your defense a little bit. And I think that the big takeaway, Kyle, was that the Grizzly defense did do their job for the most part, but then the offense, it sputtered, and that has really been a theme, I think, for the back half of the season. There is still football on the horizon. I really think we're going to talk with Coach Hauck coming up, but the hardest part is trying to turn the page, not only from a physical side of things, because that game was very physical. Both teams had a lot of key players go out of that game, but more the mental and the emotional side to overcome losing such a game like that that means so much to you, and then trying to regroup for the playoffs. The Grizz were able to do it in 2022, but they needed some late night magic at Washington Grizzly Stadium to do it. So plenty to dive into, but certainly disappointing for the Grizzlies.
100%. Roles reversed for the rivals, right?
Yep.
Because the Grizzlies were in the exact same boat a year ago, winning the Brawl, getting the 2 seed, home field advantage all the way through. Montana State now the cream of the crop, and really the team that people have to go through to get to Frisco, Texas. As we turn the page to the game, like you mentioned, the defense, that first half looked good. That first drive aside, where Montana State obviously kind of had their way, very long drive, I believe their longest drive of the year up to that point to get that touchdown, but then Montana settled in a little bit defensively, was tackling well, was getting stops and giving the offense a chance to do something. They just couldn't quite cash in on that side.
That's a good way to put it, because I think that for Montana State, they thrive offensively on explosive plays, and that's why they put those video game-like numbers up where Montana made them work. And I know that first drive, we said soul-sucking on the radio a little bit. It's a soul-sucking drive, right? 9 minutes off of the clock. The Grizzly offense sitting there in the cold. They're waiting. They've been waiting all week, and they really couldn't get into a rhythm because of what Montana State was able to do. There's some critical spots, not only in the game, but in that drive. A 2nd and 19 for the Cats, yet they're still able to pick up a first down. Scoring there, they kind of set the tone, but Montana made them work all game long. And I feel even early into the second half, Kyle, that Montana felt they were in that game. And I think even at 17-3, late second quarter, another critical spot where Montana, very mirror image of that UC Davis game, where thought maybe they were going to go for it, get some points, be aggressive, yet they let Montana State get the momentum, 3 more points. It was a 3-score lead at halftime, and it just kind of seemed like tough sledding from there.
Some self-inflicted wounds too, right? A couple penalties that hurt the Grizz on some of those drives as well. Like we mentioned, defense really settled in, played well. You had some big plays and big stops from guys like Trevin Gradney, Ryder Meyer, Jackson Lee. These guys coming up with big plays and then kind of disrupting that offense a little bit. And then you turn the page to the second half, and it just felt like the Grizz had a chance, right? You're down 20-3. You just need a strike, especially getting the ball first coming out of the third quarter. But then there was that critical sequence where it felt like Montana kind of gave Montana State an opportunity to grab momentum, and they did just that.
And that was it for me. I think that when Montana was hanging by a thread, there was a spot where it was fourth down on the 40-yard line. Same spot in the field late second quarter when they went for it. They elected to punt. That's how much they trusted their defense at that point. But once they punted, Montana State then broke off their only run of over 12 yards the entire game. It was that 88-yard run by Adam Jones. They get inside the 5. From there, the game was over. But Montana held the rope for 2.5 quarters and made the Cats work. It was wild because we thought going into it, maybe more of a shootout. Of course, that's not going to be the case, and it was more of a defensive game. But that was the one unit, too. Montana State's defense did a really good job bottling up the Grizzly offense.
And to play into that, obviously holding the Grizzlies 2 for 12 on third down, I believe, held them about 234 yards total on offense. Then obviously Montana State on the flip side, running for 326. Once they got the rhythm going, their parts all stepped up, and, you know, the Cats are Big Sky champs for a reason.
Absolutely, and I think that's the unit that should be praised a little bit more, is their defense. They've been solid all season long. They've been able to hold leads like that, and for Montana, the offensive inconsistencies the last couple of weeks, and particularly after the bye week, really have been a calling card, unfortunately, for the back half of the season, and we'll see if they can regroup for the playoffs, and big test coming up this Saturday.
No doubt about it. Well, the regular season is in the books, but we've got plenty more to talk about coming up later on the show here on the Grizz Insider. On the other side of the break, Riley will catch up with head coach Bobby Hauck to talk about the loss to Montana State and look ahead to the playoffs.
Welcome back to Grizzly Insider, sponsored by Albertsons Safeway.
And welcome back to the Grizzly Insider. Tough one for Montana last Saturday, getting ready to turn their sights to the FCS playoffs. Before we do that, we'll go back and recap last week's game here with head coach Bobby Hauck. And coach, we know how much is put into the rivalry matchup, and each year someone has to be on the losing side. It's always tough when that's the case, but just some of your initial thoughts from the game over in Bozeman on Saturday.
Yeah, it's certainly a game that we care about, as you well know. But it's funny how the script flipped in 1 year's time. You know, a year ago we were the number 2 team in the nation and had just played like it. And today, you know, they're the number 1 team in the nation. And they played like it yesterday. And you know, we're going to beat them down there. We got to play better than we did. But certainly they played well, and they're a good football team.
When you went into the game plan, obviously going up against the number 1 offense in the country, your defense held up phenomenally well. And you look at what they do with explosive plays. They had 1 rushing attempt of over 12 yards in the game. So when you kind of went into the game plan, coach, and just had the confidence with the way your defense was playing, what was the feel on at least that matchup, that side of the ball, their top offense against your defense?
I felt good about our plan going in. I felt pretty good about how the defense played. You know, we gave up the long run there when we had them backed up inside the 5-yard line on 2nd and 10, and that was the play that really made the game hard to win. You know, if we made them punt it there, good field position, we were in striking distance, good things possibly could happen. But you know, the defense played pretty solid. Holding them under averages and all that is irrelevant. It's more about stopping them enough, giving our offense enough chances, and then going and find a way to win.
I want to go back up even to the first drive of the game. It was 9 minutes long, and your defense, there were so many chances, very close all the way through. When that kind of set the tone for the game, how was it, at least for your offense, in the pressure maybe to, okay, 9-minute drive to score, and going back and forth, your defense was able to keep you in it. But just your thoughts on how the tone was set, that longer drive, and how your defense really set the tone?
Yeah, they had a good drive to start the game, and then the next one, I think they were 3 and out. Yes. But we followed that with a pretty good drive ourselves. We had a call on an illegal block below the waist. It was either was or it wasn't, but they called it, and that set us back, and we ended up with no points on that drive, and that was kind of too bad because we were moving the ball. So a lot of ways to be in that game. A lot of things that we could have done to win it, but we didn't get it done. They executed better than we did, and they got us.
Look at now the team that has to regroup, get ready to go for the playoffs. You've been in this spot before and picking up big victories, and now having that mindset of having to go 0-0 and starting and hitting that reset button, so to speak. How do you manage maybe the mentality going into this week that, yes, that one's going to sting, but obviously having to move on is the record 0-0, and everyone has a fresh shot here in the playoffs?
Sure. We have a good football team. The second season starts this coming weekend, and you know, obviously we'll be excited to be in the playoffs and chance to go compete again and go as a team. You know, the fact of the matter is we're in exactly the same situation North Dakota State was 1 year ago today. So what we do with it, that remains to be seen. Obviously, the Bison came storming into the playoffs and ended up losing to us in the national semifinal last year. So they had a great playoff run after, you know, being like us last season, and that's obviously my hope for what we can do. I don't know if we can do that or not. As you said, regroup. We've got to get some things in order. We've got to play better, and we get an opportunity to do that this weekend.
Well, Coach, we found out together of who you're going to play. You're the 14 seed. You're going to take on Tennessee State, and their head coach is Eddie George, former NFL running back. And Tennessee State 9-3. They've won 7 of their last 8 from the same conference that SEMO was in, that obviously came up here a couple years ago. So some similarities for the night game, and your thoughts on just the opening matchup, it being a night game. All of that being said, we're starting the FCS playoffs.
Yeah, I love how they keep putting us in the middle of the night. Golly, I mean, put one of them East Coast teams in the middle of the night. But whatever. We'll be on national TV. It'll be great. I don't know much about their team yet. I know they've been working at it. I have some familiarity with how they do it because you know, we've got friends with the Fishers that have been involved with them, and so they'll be well coached, they'll be well prepared, they'll know about our place, and it should be a great football game.
It'll be a fun matchup. Bobby Hauck, Eddie George, Montana, Tennessee State. It'll be Saturday night at 8:15. We'll continue on with the Grizzly Insider when we come back.
There's more coverage of the Grizzlies online anytime at montanasports.com. Welcome back to Grizzly Insider, sponsored by Albertson Safeway.
Welcome back to the Grizzly Insider. Great stuff with Riley and Bobby Hauck there as we now turn to the FCS playoffs. And so, Riley, we have the brackets are out. They're ready to go. It's the best time of the year. 24 teams enter. Only one remain for that January 6th game in Frisco, Texas to be crowned national champions. So you take a look at the bracket. What are your thoughts on kind of the top 8 seeds and how things kind of shook out with those top groups?
Well, it's amazing, right? I think when the NCAA tournament brackets come out in March, we get excited. And for me, it's around Christmas time. It's like Christmas morning. You take a look at the bracket, see all the potential matchups, right? We've been talking about this all season long. So to finally see the final picture, there's a ton of speculation. We love doing it for the last couple of months, but now it's set in stone. And the path for each team is clear. And looking at the top 8 seeds, my goodness, with the final day of the regular season, with South Dakota beating North Dakota State, it shook everything up because I think everybody thought going into it, sure, if the Bison win and the Cats win, it's an easy 1-2, and then the seeds might just fall in line. Well, with South Dakota winning, you had 4 very similar resumes for teams 2 through 5. Indy, SU, South Dakota State, South Dakota, 3-way tie at the top of the Missouri Valley. They all beat each other, all by 3 points or fewer. So the margin was so slim. Then UC Davis was unfortunately the odd team out as they're the 5 seed. So it was wild. I can't wait to see how they were able to break down 2, 3, and 4. But I think the consensus is there's a top 5 and then a gap after that. Mercer from the SoCon getting a bye. Don't have a problem with that. Incarnate Word surprised me a little bit that they were all the way up at a 6 seed with very few quality wins. They had just 1 ranked win that came against Northern Arizona. And then the Idaho Vandals, a team that we've talked about a lot throughout the course of the year, Kyle, where they have dealt with injuries in and out. They played 2 FBS teams. They really caught everyone's attention early by losing tight to Oregon, beating Wyoming. We know by now over the history that the committee loves FBS wins. It doesn't matter if Wyoming's 2-9 or not. It carries a lot of weight, and I really think that's why Idaho was able to get that final seed.
100%. And honestly, you look at South Dakota, I'd be a little upset if I were them because, you know, it looked like they were going to jump to that 2 seed. All of a sudden, they're hosting kind of all the way through, but they stay at 4, and that's kind of where things go. They might like that matchup with Montana State. It'll be a fresh matchup, and then we'll see the Dakota State schools potentially playing in the semifinal round. Now, as we take a look farther down the bracket, obviously, we had to wait a little while to see where Montana was going to be, and it was kind of up in the air, right? It felt like they could land kind of that 11, 12 at best, maybe down a little bit farther, but once they got announced, very interesting matchup coming up for them, but then interesting that the Grizz fell. But I'll tell you what, when I was watching the broadcast and saw there was an ESPN2 game, that was kind of the tell for me.
Yeah, late night game, and it's just kind of a carbon copy of what happened 2 years ago, where the Grizzlies fell in the rivalry matchup, and then they get their 4th loss, and then they're playing on national TV, and that's always great for the program. But I'm sure there's a lot of people within the state, and they're going, oh my goodness, that late at night, the temperature's supposed to be in the mid-30s. But yeah, Montana falling to the 14 seed. I thought they could be anywhere from 11 to 14 of how it all shook out. There's 3 teams in the Colonial that all were pretty good. They just seeded them 9, 10, 11. And Montana unfortunately slipped. And I really think that that Weber State loss is the one that was hard to overcome. Weber State finishes 4-8. North Dakota face planted at the end of the year. They finished with a losing record. So those 2 losses at the time felt maybe quality or not going to hurt the Grizz, but I think if we're really kind of picking straws at the end, I think that Weber State loss may be the difference for Montana not being in that 10-11 range and dropping to 14. It's going to be hard no matter what, right? If you get the win, you got to go on the road and play one of those top 5 teams that we just mentioned a moment ago. So it'll be a tough road for Montana, but that's kind of the bed they made with 4 losses in the regular season. Fortunate they still get a home game. And interesting, Kyle, for the first time seeing the bracket, 16 seeds and not 8.
How about that?
Yeah.
That'll be kind of nice. And I like that they're doing that, too. I think it's a way better format to get this thing done. It's supposed to eliminate regionalization. We'll see if that gets maybe a little bit better here going forward. But it's a nice way to kind of see how these are going to play out and get teams kind of playing some different schools. 5 Big Sky teams. And you look at NAU making it for the first time since 2017. Obviously, that win has aged very well for the Montana Grizzlies. But 5 Big Sky teams, and obviously the Missouri Valley just feels like the cream of the crop once again.
They are. 6 of the top 8 seeds are from the Valley or the Big Sky, 3 apiece. Think that's very fitting. And then 5 from the Big Sky. And we were talking about it a lot, and at 3-4, Northern Arizona did not look like maybe they were going to have the resume to make the playoffs. You looked at their schedule; they had it set up to win 5 in a row. And give Brian Wright credit; that is a phenomenal coaching job. I believe Brent Vigen should be the coach of the year, but Brian Wright should get a vote or two because Northern Arizona to make the playoffs for the first time in 7 years, that's good. And I think it's good for the strength of the Big Sky to have someone different in there. Maybe NAU replacing Sac State. Sac State was the team that was maybe the most disappointing. Northern Arizona the biggest surprise, and good to see the Big Sky flexing their muscles. Now let's see what they do in the playoffs. Northern Arizona, Montana, the 2 teams that'll play this weekend. The other 3 get a bye.
Well, the path to Frisco is officially laid out for all these teams as we enter the postseason. Coming up on the other side of the break, we'll take a look at Montana's upcoming opponent in the playoffs in Tennessee State. Stick with us. We'll be right back.
Get social with Grizzly fans and follow MTN Sports on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Welcome back to Grizzly Insider, sponsored by Albertson Safeway.
Well, now we turn the page to the first round of the FCS playoffs coming up this week after the Thanksgiving holiday. And for the Montana Grizzlies, it is the Tennessee State Tigers. So, Riley, 10,000-foot view. First of all, we're a couple of 2000s guys, right? We're a little old. Eddie George, head coach. How about that?
That was
That's
the
awesome.
first thing that popped into our heads. It's like, all right, what a cool matchup here with Eddie George coming to town and really an upstart program in Tennessee State where he takes over. And they didn't really have expectations to start. Flashy name to hire. And my goodness, in the Nashville area, and for them to have 9 wins this year, pretty impressive stuff. And I think that it's a program with a lot of momentum that comes in here. And they needed to win their final game to get in the playoffs. Those, to me, are the most dangerous types of teams because they've been playing that playoff mindset for a while. And as we're going to flip the conversation a bit, that's going to be maybe the hardest part coming up for on the other side for Montana.
And they had to beat a playoff team to get into the playoffs, right? When you have to beat SEMO. And it's interesting kind of looking at their schedule, right? Had to play some tough teams, lost to a couple of playoff teams, but then had to go on a run towards the end. Eddie George taking over in 2021. First time in 11 years they've made it. And they could be a tough opponent coming in here for the Grizzlies on national TV.
And they absolutely could. And what they're able to do is able to harness that momentum a bit and winning 7 of their last 8 games to do it. And you look at their 3 losses, and I love doing that. We always have fun with Coach Hauck. He says there's no quality losses, but at the same time, 2 of their 3 losses are to those playoff teams. So they're battle tested a bit. They have gotten better throughout the course of the year. That to me is a calling card of a dangerous team to where Montana needs to prove that they can get better by the end of the season because it's been tough the last couple of weeks. So that, at least off the top, would cause some concern, I think, coming in here for Tennessee State.
It's interesting with Eddie George because he was, I believe, a Madden cover athlete too, kind of those runs with the Tennessee Titans, but a little bit more Titan connection as well with some familiar faces on the defensive coordinator for the Titans, the son of Jeff Fisher, leading the way and a former Montana Grizzly.
How about that? See, when you think it's a brand new opponent, there's not going to be a connection, quite the opposite. So we have plenty of storylines coming in here, and it's been the Tigers defense that I think has led the way. In those wins we talked about, every one of those wins down the stretch, they've allowed 21 points or fewer. So with the way the Grizzly offense has maybe struggled a bit the last couple of weeks, that to me is the matchup on paper. A dual threat quarterback coming in here. We know the quarterback run game, how tough that is to defend, and that's something too with the weather. Now that might be the biggest factor Montana has, although the fans will see how much they like the night game. The fact that it's going to be cold, I think temperatures are going to be in the 30s. It'll be an interesting mix, and no surprise they picked it for national TV, but here we go. Let's wait around a little bit all day. It should be a fun matchup, and I really think why when you look at the 8 first-round matchups, it is the most attractive one when looking at the big names and the big name program.
I think you made a really good point earlier on, too, because this feels a lot like 2022, right? And the biggest thing about losing to your rival in that Brawl the Wild game is manifesting your own energy and rebuilding it and getting back emotionally as you enter the playoffs. And to me, that is a huge key as Montana is going to be maybe on upset watch a little bit against a quality team against Tennessee State.
I think so too. As much as we want to break down the matchups, I think what Coach Hauck and his staff, the biggest challenge they have this week is getting them mentally ready to go. You go back to that SEMO game, and a lot of parallels because SEMO came from the same conference that Tennessee State does as well, but Montana needed some magic in that game. It was pretty lifeless in the first half. It was Malik Flowers, Junior Bergen doing their thing with the kick return, punt return action, but outside of that, I do think Montana needs to regroup very quickly because that's going to be task number 1, getting up and ready to go, because Tennessee State, they will be fired up. As you mentioned, first time in 11 years, they'll be ready to go. Montana needs to match it.
No doubt about it. Well, the playoffs are officially here at the FCS level, and we're fired up to see the Montana Grizzlies and Tennessee State Tigers take on one another on Saturday. We'll wrap up the Grizz Insider next.
Get social with Grizzly fans and follow MTN Sports on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Welcome back to Grizzly Insider, sponsored by Albertson Safeway.
Well, Riley, the Montana Grizzlies are looking to get back to Frisco for the 2nd straight year. It could be a long path with some very difficult teams potentially in the way, but anything is possible in the playoffs.
It is, and everybody starts fresh, 0-0. It's hard mindset to try and get accustomed to, but that's certainly the case for Montana, and they have to take the one game at a time approach. I mean, it's been proven before. You can come out of the first round and make a long run. North Dakota State did it last year. South Dakota State did it a couple of years ago, and Montana needs to get back to the groove that we saw them in, at least in the first half of the year. They have not played a complete game all season with offense, defense, and special teams all clicking. That might be the hope of optimism that that's still in the tank for Montana.
Absolutely. Well, 24 teams remain in the FCS, and Montana and Tennessee State will be taking on one another at Washington Grizzly Stadium on Saturday at 8:15 p.m. You can catch Riley on the Grizzly Radio Network with the call, and we'll break it all down here on the Grizzly Insider next week. We'll see you then.